showed us and a little bit of how he's currently doing with this French.
Okay.
Yeah, but yeah, and then we started talking about these controllers, how we could implement like plugins and different things.
This composition clips that you have in timeline that allows you to create a pin and connect another composition. They insert tracks and clips. That's a controller, a specific implementation of a controller. Something that operates on the composition, but you can imagine any sort of controller, no? Like a auto clip size, where you select certain clips and say it needs to have the upper bounds needs to be the next clip, for example. Automatically checking the model and make sure that this is correct. But you can add any sort of controller that operates in the model, whatever you want.
Also being able to export and import the timeline so you can work on different softwares. What else? Oops. Empty implementation across multiple instances, across multiple machines.
Okay. So I hope to do now.
Start patching.
No. We don't patch this week, bro. No, I would say to try to think about the topics now. Okay, what are the topics on the plate? And for each topic, we have a nice big shape, let's say. I don't know. Right, circle there. No, it's not good.
No, I'm against circus. Let's just discuss about the shape.
I mean, round.
This is, for example, is UI. Okay.
Can we change the font?
Yeah.
Also the colors.
Can you zoom in a bit?
I also to zoom in stuff. So another topic, for example, is data binding. Okay. Another one. You tell me. Infrastructure.
Like repositories, documentation, or something. Yeah, infrastructure.
Okay, let's be more specific, maybe.
DevOps.
That'll be like part of the infrastructure.
Save and export, we talked yesterday.
Which is
Serialization. Like adding, supporting other formats and also like
format exchange.
yeah, like cross tool sharing the timeline
I need a name, a title.
Data exchange.
For example, to share the timeline data, but not sharing the patch. Because right now everything belongs to the patch. And this is a bit annoying when you are working with several people in a team. So you have to share.
Yeah, storing like the model in a file, for example.
yeah, this serialization.
Matching files, for example, this is important when you are working.
Yeah,
with
we
several
briefly talked about it yesterday.
Export, import, or something like this.
Foreign affairs.
Foreign affairs.
Wow. Getting saucy.
Yeah.
I mean, all this kind of controller plugging extension things,
Yeah.
you know.
And also,
Then we can also particularize the section, like UI, there already there's a lot of chapters.
I didn't see you yesterday talking about how to control also the Kairos stuff, not interacting, I mean, not putting a controller and doing envelopes or something like that, but controlling the whole tool. That kind of. You know what I mean?
Like the metrics, for example, how to trigger it.
How to trigger with a MIDI controller, for example. I connect a MIDI controller and I want to access immediately to all the presets I have.
Is it part
That,
of
for
UI or
example,
interfacing?
I would imagine like it's a controller.
This is that,
If you have a matrix, normally it's just a UI that you plug, that you press, but you have a Ableton controller
Launchpad or
that you
something.
establish that already has a mapping, for example, and automatically links the runtime that I mean, he produced, like he listened to the device and mapped those signals to a certain part of the
Mhm.
runtime, no? So that thing, yeah, it could be controllers section, like maybe we can add
Yeah, I mean, it would be nice to have some sort of API type thing, you know, you can talk to Kairos without needing the UI. You can do it by code or some HTTP request or OSC or blah, blah, blah.
And also synchronization.
Yeah, this
This
came in the
is
chat.
super important working in a commercial field
synchronization, what do you mean?
with all the kind of devices.
Protocols, you mean like
SMT.
External time code.
time codes?
Yeah, this kind of thing.
SMT.
Yeah, so I would say, I don't know,
Synchronization, I think makes
Yeah.
sense.
Blocks, basically, start clocks.
clouds and
And synchronization.
synchronization is also about, I mean, it's a bit generic. This is a specific topic related to time, and you know, synchronization is also their synchronization of the model and the runtime.
Okay, you're right.
Oh,
It's,
okay.
but this is, we are really thinking to
Time synchronization.
times and
Time
time,
sync.
no,
Time sync. Yeah.
time sync.
So it will take a while, just figuring out the right.
And what else? Very
Infrastructure,
important one.
States.
Yeah.
Obviously.
And then standalone.
You were really going for this standalone one. Okay.
Isn't that enough already?
Wait, this maybe we can do a big one then. Infrastructure.
Does that contain website and all that stuff?
Yeah, documentation.
Everything that's not in the section. Structure, I guess, is everything that's not in Visual. Right? Not the library itself.
We have GitHub, right? Oh, DevOps.
Yeah.
DevOps. can
DevOps
be
is
part of
What is a website? Maybe eventually.
Miro thing also, no, like this kind of creating an account, well, community or something like this, like how we are gonna interact. Yeah, okay.
Painful, right?
Bigger font for content.
Yeah. UI is so small. What? They're massive. I don't get it. I think I know why. Anyway. Is it enough? Now we can just start adding notes inside of each one of them. So, Sort them a bit. This, for example, would be massive. Okay, we can maybe go through each one of them
Yeah.
and find subtopics, no? Thank you. Okay. We could do this in before as well. I did a workshop with. Okay, I can see. I mean, if we have something else in mind. Okay, shall we start from? Yeah, no.
Whatever. Yes, do this.
Documentation.
Yeah.
Like Miro.
What?
Miro board.
The mirror board being a part of the documentation. Okay.
I mean, it's a reference.
Yeah,
It's
sure.
Miro, no?
Yeah.
Should be accessible, I think.
Linked in the node browser, you could say. If it becomes public.
It should.
But documentation is for end user, no? Or
Yeah, but
maybe you need two different types of documentation already.
Yeah, I would say
Developer
so.
documentation. Yeah, end user. Because an end user, if you send him the Miro board,
Doesn't make a lot of, I mean, you can just export it as an image and have it.
Honestly,
Whatever.
yeah,
Yeah,
but
I
I
don't
think
know.
that's very useful.
we should maybe export this kind of stuff
Yeah.
and put them in a structured wiki
Yeah.
somewhere.
I mean, GitHub, you can have like a wiki for the repo, no?
So yeah, we need to understand that we need a wiki.
Yeah.
Okay, sure. The option are GitHub.
Then you can link, you can put link to the wiki pages in the bar, in the help browser.
Mhm.
Help actions, obviously.
tutorials.
Yeah.
Probably like some sort of forum thing, I mean, it could probably live in the Newport website, but it would be good to have a section. Just to talk about these things, like
We already have a element
chat room.
space, actually, I created a space with several,
Kairos space.
yeah, several rooms, so. Yeah. could be like-
Actually, I'm gonna add that to the main VV space.
And getting shit done. No action.
Tutorial, help actions, and maybe a video tutorial. Probably.
That can come after, I would say. Because that's really time consuming.
Video tutorial.
This, like Georg was saying, like end user documentation, but also like the developer oriented documentation. Different.
One we never did. How detailed do we go? after help matches. Like one of the first thing we should do would be like explain the core concepts like to a 5 years old. And like one help match per concept, like what is the layer, what are shapes, how do they play together? But like all the terminology should have a help match so that user.
This is important, yeah, like clarifying and really structuring the terminology,
Yeah.
right?
Because there are too many concepts.
Yeah.
Otherwise.
Yeah, sure.
And so that we're all talking in the same language.
Yeah, we need a wiki.
A glossary for terms.
Yeah,
Kairos for dummies.
Let's get the book deal.
Yeah, man. Yeah.
Right. And add this.
yeah, concrete under tutorials and help matches like concrete use cases, like controlling a data type, stretching time.
So yeah, said one last night, when he was like, that is a tutorial, and he was very insistent.
Yeah.
What was it?
Was it?
When with Sune,
That was with Zoom?
maybe.
Integral.
No, I don't know,
Maybe
that's just was a solution that was suggested to a problem.
Mm.
Was it that you said that you want to make an integration of all the banks and then this additional thing?
Yeah. It's more like a
Specific.
technical solution.
Yeah. Yeah, I don't didn't write anything.
I mean, it's fine, we can come back and.
Yep.
Think about. DevOps.
So moving everything to a single repo, I guess.
Well, deciding how we're gonna tackle the repo, if it's like this discussion we were having, is it a single repo, is it sub-modules, is it separate repos?
Agree on a release cycle or release policy, so to say. Like, do we release preview often and then we release, like releasing preview very often and then a stable, or what do we want? How do we want to do that?
It's hard to do something first and then win this.
No, yeah, but I mean, I know, but
Release strategy.
Yeah,
We
release
need to
strategy.
define this.
Deploy. Strategy, no.
release.
Also, like having a clear branching strategy, you know,
Yeah.
how are we gonna, is everyone doing their own branch?
No.
Are we having a dev and release type thing, or is it like, you know?
Yeah, about the release cycle, is there like, should we stick to VV versions? Like, see what I mean? We already had this discussion for Fuse. Like, do we release a Fuse version with new VV version, or how do we say that version N is compatible with VV version M, whatever?
Yeah, versioning in general, maybe that's part of the release.
Yeah.
Stuff, no?
Yeah, versioning.
But yeah, versioning, what do you call that?
Model versioning.
I like it.
Version more than a long time.
Testing, is that something we're gonna have? Like some sort of tests for, to make sure everything is as it should be? And this could maybe be automated.
How is it called? Test.
Automated test, unit test, automated test. I don't know. So DevOps,
Also, well, it's part of the release, well, you already have the look at thing. I think it makes sense already.
websites.
I mean, that's pretty
for
self-explanatory.
later, yeah.
We use the GitHub.io feature that I showed you, like GitHub pages.
Oh, yeah.
That makes things like you don't need to care for a domain name, blah, blah, blah. You get something running instantly. And it can be,
It's a website, no?
yeah,
Could be an option, easy option for the beginning.
yeah, and you can just use the repo to deploy, which is. perfect.
And we can have the wiki in there somehow.
The wiki would be on the,
I mean, there are
but
links.
I think, yeah, I guess you can generate pages from the wiki as well, or something. Yeah, there's something like that.
For the, yeah, you can do the Git books.
So that doesn't exist anymore, no?
Yeah, sure.
It's been, was
Yeah.
it deprecated?
No,
No,
Where's the grade?
what is it? The university, Git
Oh.
books.
we are not using it for the
Ah,
gradebook
good.
anymore because it's now, you have to pay for it.
Ah,
Yeah, they have a free and then, but for the bigger one, you have to.
Yeah, true, if you have more collaboration.
Yeah.
yeah, but I mean, just the built-in wiki.
But it's-
GitHub pages.
There's this other thing I never tried, but also stumbled upon it. Sometimes it's called read the docs.
Ah, yeah, that's what they use in Python, no?
Yeah, it's quite used around the internet. And that, but it's for self-hosting, I guess. I'm not sure if there is a hoster.
Funding, open collective, I guess. We would explain you better than me, but it's like you set up a project on open collective and you can transparently collect money and dispatch money. And they handle all the tax shit for you. And like everybody who subscribed to your project can see like who gave money and where the money went.
I already have a profile there,
Okay.
Wow, look at that.
waiting approval. So, because it needs, GitHub needs to reach 100 stars.
And we have 70 something.
Let's just create a bunch of fake accounts.
But what about that? That's because of bots, not email.
Let's patch yeah, registration.
But say
62
But
stars.
I was wondering, why did you create your own open collective even for that? Why don't you put it under the Fuse umbrella
Yeah.
instead of
So different thing.
different thing? But
No, doesn't make sense.
well, it's a completely different discussion, I guess. But the cool thing about open collective is that you can have different projects under one collective.
Projects are more for like saying we have a goal, and you can target maybe money for that project. It's not a sub part of your project. And how would you present? That's the Fuse Lab.
Yeah, the naming is.
Then it should be the VVV Foundation, I would
Exactly.
say.
There you go.
Yeah.
Then you would have sub projects,
Yeah.
but that's another discussion. I don't want to get into that.
Baby, don't forget that.
Huh?
It's also your baby.
It's not my baby, it's an abortion.
Goes down here fast.
Don't say that, come on.
Easy now.
I even had put the development camp here. No, but it's cool. You can customize it, but still it's pending approval. So this is a topic. Once we get this, then people can bake in, sponsor, and we can even have projects inside here. So we say, okay, one project could be timeline UI, no, and people can tip in for that specific goal. And also people feel also they can participate in the roadmap, no?
Roadmap.
Somehow assigning priorities. So it's cool. It's a nice platform. But yeah, still we need to.
I mean, are you planning on talking with specific studios and things like, I don't know, Martin and Schnellunterwille, like, is that also, or is it gonna happen through this open collective?
We can see. I mean, going through open collective, they take 10% of the incomings just for managing the platform. So if there's a big studio interested in pushing money, maybe we can arrange directly with them. you know?
Yeah.
So since we know them, it's fine.
Yeah, but another.
I think this is
That's
more
what-
for the micro funding, no? Like people just dropping €5 a month, or I don't know.
That also serve as a bank account, no? So,
Well, yeah, it's a financial entity, so
Yeah.
who is involved in the development can invoice the. So it's really like a host for a financial,
that's how it works.
and that's the whole point, no? So to make it simple, otherwise I don't know, I would need to get all the money on my account, pay taxes on that,
Yeah,
and declare it, and then pay who develops things now. So I would saturate my,
yeah,
and that's why it's good to have this other entity, no?
right, okay.
I think it's for microfunding is perfect. So this is the thing to reach and on the start. So, and this is, I guess, related to communication. I will communicate about the project, and because people need to know that we are doing this thing.
Yeah, you could have Python, like Kairos would know like a specification there, and then you have several languages targeting. That's like,
Yeah, I would like to rename the libraries. Getting out PL at the beginning. Because they are just libraries that have implementations inside, no? And VL also is the first
create
one.
an organization.
And then you still deploy like the NuGet, like Kairos.
Yeah, but I mean, that you should then create a GitHub organization called Kairos, and then you have VL Kairos repo, Kairos Python, whatever repo. And not everything in the same repo, otherwise it becomes.
Yeah.
Like if you want to work on some VL stuff, then you're gonna pull some like Java, Python, blah, blah, blah. That doesn't make sense.
This is an option.
Could you make GitHub organization?
Okay. Communication strategies. Yeah, I guess once we have a roadmap for example, the next meetup, we could communicate about the camp, the outcome, and show maybe a roadmap. Okay, there's a clear plan. In that occasion, will be already cool to have this open collective thing ready, so that people, okay, let's go, what's happening, let's contribute now. But I don't know, we really need to find these 40 stars somewhere.
That's easy.
I even try to go to the creative coding.
Did you do it?
Of course, Sebastian was there.
How did it go?
Yeah, people were a bit overwhelmed. I mean,
He
nobody.
invited everybody to come to the Kairos Camp. Oh my God.
Wow, 200 people here.
No.
But
It
it
was
was
for most of them, it was the first time they ever seen before. So for them just seeing this visual, I mean, I was like, people already still like doing pixel shifting in processing, not knowing that there are GPUs around. So this kind of gap, okay. And on top of this visual programming language, Kairos, with this simplicity, you know. No, some of them more technical, just got it.
So like the guys growing the macros. What? The macros. They built some mushrooms with, I don't know, paper, with the posters.
With the poster.
Yeah, posted on the
Is it
that was nice as well.
Is it a burning?
But it was quite a gap between us and the mushrooms.
Was it the creative coding Berlin?
Huh?
Creative coding Berlin?
Yeah.
Yeah, so when you release the first.
And I got like 7 stars, bro, 6, so
You got
I did my part.
It was work.
No, 5 stars.
When they released the first Gamma preview, the very first one, we went there in 2018, after one of the workshops to show them, and they were still shipping pixels in processing, and they're still doing it.
It's a crazy. So, yeah.
What about the administration side of things? Like, is it all gonna be you figuring out?
Of course.
Yeah, okay, great. That's
No, what do you mean?
like. Who is managing this funding thing? Who's having those conversations? Who is deciding?
Well, for
who
example,
goes
in
in, how
the
much they get paid, all
the
these.
collective, Chris is already administrator, for example, because I had at least 2. And then I was waiting for the camp to see, okay, who is interested in the work, no?
This is what I mean, like, there's gonna be some sort of administrative structure.
Yeah,
Some
a team of people,
Yeah,
a team of people.
So
That's
this
why
is-
I added the conversation, the chapter here.
okay, there we go.
Because, yeah, we need to say who is interested in doing what, who can take care of what. So, yeah. Which one you want to tackle now? UI.
We can make a rough iteration and then we can go.
Yeah, yeah.
into the-
Yeah.
Because UI, I think, is a big topic.
Yeah, always, I mean, we can find some topics like timeline, UI, I don't know.
Which library
There's-
first?
Huh?
Which library?
Yeah, so is it in GUI, is that decided?
Is
or-
that in
No, no,
Elementor? Is it in
well,
GUI?
Yeah, there are general discussions like,
Is it
yeah.
web?
First, what we are going to use for UI.
Which
Elementor
library?
is still on the.
I just put it there.
Pick it up.
I don't want to use it, but
Yeah, then remove it.
um,
It's out of the question.
it's already bigger. So.
Yeah. Put it on top of Elementor.
Yeah. To achieve the same thing within GUI than we have with Elementor won't happen like that.
I know, that's why I just put it there and say.
This is also a question, do we need the same flexibility? I mean, in terms of look, or what do you mean in terms of?
No, in terms of, can we like create an envelope editor, for example,
Uh-huh.
no? So far, we didn't see any advanced UI tools
Yeah.
in GUI, no?
Mhm.
Like, I don't know, Bezier, can we do those?
Is it
With
possible?
our-
But in C++.
In the sense that maybe you need, okay, we don't need to build a very generic way to move objects around, like it's in Elementor, there's this movable thing. I mean, we can, okay, we need to create a keyframe track. We just do it, not even in GUI, we do like a Skia interaction thing that we inject as a GUI widget.
Mhm.
There are different strategies that we need to discuss. Huh? So very specific, because we need that. So that's why what kind of flexibility do we, how much we generalize things, how much.
In many things we can do also in Stripe directly. Instancing when we have like a lot of keyframes, it doesn't make sense for.
I mean, doing a UI in 3 would be amazing. Can you imagine? Like the tracks in VR. Yeah, the tracks. You see that like this the spread track is the track and the spread is vertical.
Or
Or you can
instead,
have, a track of particles, and each like a clip is a particle system moving there. Or you can take it from there and connect it to something else. It's amazing.
Did you send this to create the as well?
No.
No.
It would have called, yeah.
I was talking about the style in terms of instancing and this kind of thing.
But
Keeping everything in 2D, but we can dream about that.
I think we'll point, yeah, everything.
that's really tough, though. I mean, or like, no, in a way, Ingui opens to that kind of thing, no? Because it just generates a geometry in the end. So the backend could be Stripe.
Yeah.
Right? Am I right?
Yeah. It's just a mesh.
It's one way to create a mesh or to, you know, draw something. But I don't know, if you really want to go into the direction 3D, then this is not the way. Going via English 2D. But if you want to just develop something that we need anyways, like we just say, okay, we need a point editor, proper point editor anyways for the clients. We need all sorts of 3D curves anyways, like busy. We want to have a proper editing framework in for 2D and 3D. And then if we can rely on this, and we can rely on displaying particles and lines and handles, you know, then we can use all this functionality to just say, oh, come on, why don't we use just that to edit the values of a timeline, of course. I mean, in beta, it was the same thing, actually. We had the camera modules, then the point editor came, you know, 2003 or what, and at some point everybody was using that to nobody was thinking about 2D. Everybody just used these modules, not to do whatever. Well, so
Still, we are talking about generalizing again.
I'm talking about
Editing framework.
nobody was even thinking about a new way of drawing, and there was this DirectX stuff, and everything was done for that and for this you know, DirectX 9 or then DirectX 11, but it was always about 3D, and you don't need 3D, then you just take a orthogonal camera and so on, and everything that you drew was optimized in a way. There's no question about that, and so of course there are advantages to that as well. If you just skip the whole idea of a UI framework and just go for the 3D, and at some points where you are not happy because you want to just show a model dialog box or whatever, well, you can of course then locally use a UI framework and open up a window, or I don't know, or draw a texture into your 3D scheme, right? You know, but what's the basis? Where do you start? And I don't think it's completely. I wouldn't rule out to start with 3D, because yeah, it actually opens up a lot of possibilities to do different visualization.
Of course, I mean, I really envision having 3D stuff directly into the UI.
If we don't go for 3D, I mean, it's a good approach for big amount of elements. Because this is the biggest problem I have of building timelines, for example. But at certain moment when you have like 200 keys or something like that, it became super heavy to use.
But English should be much faster in
I
general.
don't know, I didn't try.
In general, me neither, but they say that it's very fast. So I don't know, maybe it already helps
Yeah.
by itself. I mean, 200 keyframes shouldn't be a problem for any CPU nowadays.
Yeah, but
Depends how you draw them.
when you have to move everything, I mean, I tried in Skia and it's a bit too much for small computers.
But that's maybe how you draw it in Skia, no? Like, for example, it's very much,
The best way, I don't know, maybe
it's not optimized in Skia, like,
I
you wanna do instancing, how do you do instance?
I remember doing the same with DirectX 11 was much faster.
Yeah.
Yeah, it was a
That's,
upgrade, you know. Even with 2000 difference, but nobody will use 2000 difference only.
so
What
yeah,
I'm wondering about this 3D thing is usually you will be using these timelines to drive generative 3D content that's heavy on the GPU anyway. If we're throwing the UI also on top of the GPU, this is kind of counterproductive.
yeah, but that's just the editing part.
No.
Yeah, I mean, I think about concrete use scenarios, like I'm doing Evolver, I'm in VR, and there I have my timeline or my controller, and I can directly tweak stuff while I'm in the space looking at the content, and that's mind blowing. Yeah, of course. One way could be to draw this UI on something flat that I draw in 3D. I don't know. But from what I understand, Ingui still is a good option for now.
If we decide to draw Skia stuff and use it as in GUI widgets, yeah.
Or maybe one step would be to have Ingui with the backend in Stride. Right, and so to draw things in Stride instead of Skia.
But I don't know, I don't see like drawing custom 2D widgets with Stride. You would still need to draw them in Skia and use them as widget and then.
No.
Yeah, but
And what would be the benefit of drawing it in Stride? Just to be sure that it's possible, like if you wanna at some point.
It's more efficient. Skia is not efficient. This is my experience.
Yeah.
I never managed to do something fast in Skia. You draw 200 circles and it's having 200.
But here the thing is that my understanding is Ingui gives you a mesh and it's one draw call. I think it's like 4 in the end. Or something. But
All kind of measures.
yeah, it's a couple of draw calls in the end, but not one for each circuit.
But then,
So that's what makes it generally fast because it just.
how can we then? Ingui is not that nice. It's not done to make fancy UIs for sure.
not fancy.
No.
Yeah, but maybe we don't need fancy.
No, but still we need
for
to-
the whole panels and.
Exactly, that part is perfect. It's
within this
essential. Like for more advanced stuff like keyframe curves and those stuff, we need to build something there, no?
Yeah.
So either we go from Ingui directly, creating Ingui widgets, or we pass through Skia. And in that case, yeah, there is the bottleneck, which is not drawing. We will still need to draw 300 keyframes with curves and everything in the way we do normally with Skia, no? With paths and that's heavy in my experience. And
I don't know, I thought Ingui can do lines and rectangles.
Yeah, but you will have to do it in C++.
This is an issue.
I thought Ingui just has
what was the leading
primitives, you mean?
primitives, I thought.
what was the
Maybe it would be convenient to make a kind of wrappers that we can use in BL.
For Ingui.
Yeah. With the most important things, we don't need to use the whole library for that.
Ingui?
Yeah.
Look, it has primitives.
Oh. Yeah, I'm good. Enough. Emily is also good. Yeah. Yeah. Is it? You. Yeah. Awesome. Nice to see you.
Nice to see you in the flesh for the first time, man.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Hey, man. Good to see you. Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, I'm super fit.
Did you run here from Berlin? Want to take a shower?
I don't need it. Like my resistance to it. I was just walking out sweating here. What are you skating for? No, he's running. He's running. Do something.
Too hard, it's not a big problem.
It's a process, you know.
Well, there is no C# wrapper for this.
Yeah.
There is?
There's a video.
What? Can I put you?
But is it, are you guys making?
Forest?
it?
Forest, yeah.
There's a nougat already going.
Not sure if there's a nougat, but we're working on it.
Yeah, I see, okay.
Yeah,
Coming forward.
There's a stick up thing and then we made a,
Okay.
but so I guess we can't discuss this to the end, we need to try it. So someone needs to sit and make some,
Can you send the links? You guys didn't wrap the primitives. You only wrap the UI widgets,
to be, yeah, I don't know,
I think.
yeah, but
Can be done.
Yeah, send me the links.
of what?
You're looking at. I can drop them here.
Yeah, I just opened the Imgue belt thing.
I thought you were on. What was the page with those?
Also in GUI, but I talked about it with Sebastian yesterday, and it's not. It doesn't work like that. I mean,
yeah.
you can't automatically generate those bindings and shit. Because they have an envelope editor in there.
But these are like additional libraries, I mean, sitting on top of Imgue. Additional libraries.
Yeah, the user contributed in GUI widgets,
Yeah,
and there are lots that there are node editors, crazy curve, like text viewer, whatever.
yeah, so I don't think it makes sense to talk much more about it other than
Yeah,
writing down the options and like making a plan on how to evaluate these, no? If they're to figure out if they're suitable.
What is a good prototype approach to figure out if it's making sense? Like what would be a good initial set of tests or widgets?
Yeah, I guess define the needs. And then see if we can realize it with the library.
We have already a good starting point, which is elemental. We don't need all the widgets we have there. But also I see that we has more and more options in certain things. For example, the color wheel is more interesting.
Yeah, maybe that, yeah, I think I'd expect maybe we can just look at what we already, well, what you guys already did for Elementa and kind of choose a few things and see how hard it is to get them working in this Imgue stride setup.
Yeah, I would. First, I would go really through just recap what we need.
Yeah.
Because it's vast and many things are not needed, no? But let's start from the use case scenarios, what you really need. As users, what we really need to play with, to use these tools, and then we can.
And apropos use cases, we don't have a category for use cases. Maybe it makes sense.
Yeah.
I don't know.
In the help patches, no?
In the help patches, there is one.
Did you mean like use cases for the Kairos.
Or maybe it could,
Yeah, yeah.
could be nice to have like a
I mean, like a more designer oriented.
just random thing that comes from our mind, like what we could do in general, what we would like to do, control stuff.
Kind of high level use cases for also is a good thing to attract people into, yeah.
Maybe we can just try to remember all the points that we went through yesterday and stuff,
Yeah.
because otherwise it's gone. Where was it? Blocks.
We wrote
Or sampler, multi-sampling, flexible.
Was this a flexible timeline thing?
Yeah.
Right? Also queues.
Wait.
Come on.
Just,
Come on, flexible or,
flexible timeline,
yeah,
clips. What was it?
it was like. It was about scaling the playback speed, no? Basically.
Yeah. Yeah. Then we had something. We had events and views.
Yeah, like Q. Yeah. No, Q's in this case is CUES. Without the I.
Cuties.
QEs.
Cuties.
Yeah,
Views, okay. Just like cycling back home, we had a revelation, or we can discuss later. Regarding the topic. What else?
Events, states, and queues.
Yeah.
Okay.
I mean, the syncing thing, but it's already a full box outside. This time code, blah, blah, blah.
There was already
If you
like,
want, we can go directly to this one, it's easy. Many protocols.
not normalization, the
Quantizing.
quantization.
And is it part of the?
Yeah, everything it belongs here so much.
I was more thinking about the protocol.
Yeah, like
It was,
SEMT,
it was
this
this
kind of
came
stuff.
up. But what about the UI still? I mean, we drop it like that, no, it's still not. It's still
Yeah,
like, for example, what about modularity? I was thinking we have 3 libraries nicely modularized and in a shell structure. And so, for example, an envelope editor, something that you could create for your X, for an interpolator. And that's sort of because that's the building block that you use to create a UI, a timeline, no?
And then that could be used in in an inspector, not necessarily only for
Exactly.
Kairos.
You could have like just an interpolator there if you just want to use the interpolator in layer X, and you could have an editor for it, you know, because and that's when I'm thinking is modularity throughout the libraries.
But what, like Sebastian was saying, for example, 2D and 3D point editors are gonna be necessary regardless of what happens, but it would be, of course, nice to have this be reusable for the end. Obviously, like, you know, we don't want to make a 2D point editor for Kairos and it's only there. So I'm not suggesting like write Elementa again in GUI, but it would be nice to have it be a separate thing, no?
Editing framework.
Yeah.
Yeah, this is the topic also, now that we already wrote like how much to generalize
Mhm.
problematics. And it's a fact that if you want to generalize, you're thinking more problematic, I mean, more abstract, and it takes more time. Because you really need to imagine all possible scenarios, and it takes more time. This is also, I was saying, how much do we generalize, how much do we just tackle one thing specifically? Or it's,
They don't need to be mutually exclusive. You can be specific at first, but having the intention of it getting to a general place eventually, right? And when you design the software with this in mind, you make different choices. That if it's just get this done and figure it out here, you know?
Okay, then maybe leave a link to the awesome here in GUI. As well.
where is it?
Just look for awesome in GUI on whatever search engine.
Also,
Always on, yeah.
Google fixes that for you.
And yeah,
This one, right?
yeah,
don't
yeah.
need to think anymore. Yeah, we're good.
Talking about inspector.
Mm.
What about gamma
It's
inspector?
here, it's here.
Very quiet.
Yeah, no,
That's in the
It's
work.
happening.
That's in the
Yeah.
working.
So maybe if it's in the working, maybe we don't need to invest much time on the inspectors. We can rely more on the
Yeah, no, no.
gamma side.
I mean, this is it's not about building our inspector, it's
Yeah.
building editors that then gets used in the inspector,
Mhm.
right? So if you build an editor for a blending technique, blending model that then you use in your composition. It could be like a custom editor, now with nice design of the settings, you know, real editor that get registered for that type. So whenever you click on that in the inspector, you would have the nice editor instead of just someone running.
And then we should definitely go for that.
Huh?
Should definitely go for that, like individual editors per library and not everything.
I would still
else.
say so, I mean,
Yeah.
because. Yeah, there's certain functionality here, like all these models, which includes, interpolation models and are very precise and specific topics, and then you wanna operate in them in a certain way. So it's a plus. You can start just adding all the parameters as they are, no, in the inspector, you just, and then just to be aware that we can
Another
get nicer UI for this, for all the objects at all the levels.
We should probably write that down. It's maybe a little bit too fuzzy, like inspector and editors is a little bit clear what is meant by that. So you really want to express here what are the demands towards the depth, the VL, whatever team that builds the inspector and demands towards the API design or the IDE API, so that you can actually do what you want to do. So that's very important to define your needs.
I'd probably say it's demand hostage situation. That's not requirement.
Yeah, because I mean, this is okay. We know what to register them. No.
So what we want to have is the inspector that can be used for views, for
everything.
for everything.
So far,
Like the
we have-
inspector
We have clear mechanism
on
on
place that's just always there, and that
ideally we want
and if it works out, it's like visualizing a node with its inputs and outputs, and allows you to adjust the values of the inputs and inspect the values of the outputs.
Yeah.
stuff like that, right?
And also the how to customize them. So not only relying on your design decisions, but if we want to extend them, we are able to do that in an easy way. The registering or on, I don't know, on design.
The-
or the data.
The thing that now we have a mechanism to register tooltips, right?
Yeah,
There
but
should be a
then you-
same mechanism to register editor.
Yeah.
That's it.
As I understand, you already invented your new registration system for Fuse. Like in the tooltips for Fuse, they somehow know if they should show it SDF. So if you have a plus.
That's a very advanced case scenario.
Yeah, okay, so,
We had to come up with some custom thing because
yeah.
we are not using even classes. I can't register because they are just all process nodes. Just a mechanism that goes, that traverse, I mean, that take the types inside and check the graph upstream, and it's been more advanced.
No, just, the question here is it possible to do this? How do, what does it mean for us to enable stuff like that, or is it always possible somehow to build such a thing? So there's nothing for us to worry about. But for me, it's like we should also discuss maybe what's the difference between an editor and a viewer, or shouldn't there be a difference? That's would be very valuable to go into detail here, because you don't want to implement everything twice. It should somehow look the same. And a viewer is just a read-only version of an editor, maybe, but sometimes you realize that editing is a different beast that comes with new constraints, and visualizing like a spread of vector 2D could look very different from an editor of spread of vector 2D, you know. You have much more options when displaying than when editing, because when editing
But still
you might
displaying-
need to also
Display most of the time imply also editing your view. For example, what we do in VL when we want to display a spread of float with sliders, you can't just put an IO box there. You need to put an IO box, customize it, put a min, a max, enable the sliders, and then you see something meaningful. Because the spread of number can be any sort of things. It's just the way you look at things already. It's an editing of your. It's a custom. The view already is one perspective. Data itself doesn't present itself. So that's already a limit of the tooltips in the way they are. Because yeah, it works if, like for example, like a Kinect skeleton. If you just walk outside, you don't see anything. Why? Because we just show a certain fraction of the space. And why? Because we can't change view. So this is limiting. And that's why in VL you implemented a possibility to customize an IO box. Essential. So this principle is it's always like viewing something is already defining how you view it. So what I always dream is that you have a node with a side optional pin where you can plug an editor, like something that is not before, not after, it's just
For this instance.
it's an editor, or also the tooltip. I don't know, it's already should be customizable.
I didn't get that where you can plug in
It was
editor.
a brain fart.
You know what? Can I say it again? You have an IO box and then you connect.
No, like
Guys, aren't we deriving too much and focus on other Kairos things before, because we have lots of subjects of things to tackle now. Yeah, I'm okay talking about UI all day, but it's okay.
So I was imagining like, how do I have in the patch a UI, a controller for this? It's not an input, it's not an output because it's just side pin that goes to a window here where I can control it, for example, no?
Do you want to go in this direction?
No, it's just, or, I mean, yeah, to not explode the nodes side.
I was more thinking about to have a proper set of windows or a window. When you select a bunch of nodes, you get all the parameters of the nodes, inputs and
Well,
outputs.
No, that's needed. That's the
I
first
mean,
thing. That's the inspector also. Now you can have multiple inspectors. And
That would be awesome to have multiple
that you
inspectors.
can, for example, you have different nodes,
But I don't know what it means in
And
terms of.
you select them, and the one that you select, you have
Yeah,
then, and you can lock. So you have just this window locked to those nodes, and you continue to play. with it.
And also, if we have an inspector, a good inspector, we can select how to send, for example, we have a parameter available, okay, create a fucking track in the Kairos level. In the inspector.
That's
I'm
that's
going to
about
be maybe.
VL integration.
Yeah.
There's
I mean, we can also just for fun, look at the current version of the inspector. We just install the Nugget Wheel Inspector HDE, I think it's called. And we can have a look how it looks.
But maybe we can do it later.
Yeah.
Going more into deep.
Maybe it's not super relevant, but for multi-screen or single screen in the inspector level. I don't know what it implies in terms of programming or performance. To have several windows or to have like one window and.
With docking.
Yeah.
Well, this is-
Maybe it's a bit trivial on to every.
I mean, if the inspector is done in Ingui, there is docking in Ingui. Potentially, we could have now one window having multiple inspectors in there. Multiple views, no, that you can independently lock.
But in this case, it's not really, I mean, it's not so flexible. When you have many screens, you can put the screens everywhere and you have to like your own environment.
The problem is that
What it means.
the VL is not Ingui, it doesn't have any docking, so we will always need to arrange stuff around.
Yeah.
And that's the problem. What I imagine is that you have one for now, one screen with window, one screen where you can arrange with the nice docking certain windows, which are inspectors. One of them is a timeline, because you can dock everything, not staying in Ingui. You can have an inspector classic, and then one other inspector that is locked to certain nodes with some editors there. So you can somehow build your advanced combination of editors there, and having those two things, because for now they have to be separated. That's what I thought. Yeah. So Ingui is a big thing, and maybe one thing that we can tackle as a group or as a more some of you just looking into this option and checking what are the possibilities there. And I don't know. But we can come back to the theme. VL integration.
I mean, this idea when you have an inspector and you have a module with the inputs, you can select with any input and decide what to do with that. No? Through the inspector. That would be a nice way. And this is actually what is how it's done in touch design, for example. This connection to the timeliner is done in inspector.
So you select a parameter and you say, I want to control it,
Yeah,
create a track.
create a track or create or not even a track. Maybe you can create a kind of control channel to a controller or an expression like in touch design. okay, move this guy based on the time divided by 2, these kind of things. So it's more like a scripting expressions. But we need a kind of place to do that. And I think inspector is the proper way. Because I'm not really, for example, the way you are designing the whole Kairos environment, writing in the pins, everything, I think is super advanced, but I don't feel comfortable working in that way. So,
But that's it's not about it's more it's like it's programming.
yeah.
So when you build a system, you want to do that, like because there's no other way.
But I mean, other ways.
Well, no, if you patch something in the air, you need to somehow connect it to your software, right? Your so it's in the patch. So
But maybe this is the thing, we are relying much on patching. And there are certain things that we don't really need to patch. So
But
maybe, yeah.
that's why you can extend Kairos like you have. Okay, I want to always receive from OSC. I don't want to create a pin there and then put an OSC receiver and connect. You don't need it. You can simply implement a new clip, which inside has an OSC receiver. So it's an OSC clip. You put it there, you configure with an OSC channel, and you just simply receive inside. So you don't need to patch anything inside.
Mhm,
So in that regard, we can build a library of these little modules, no?
mhm.
That we can simply use directly inside without touching the patch.
I mean, it breaks the whole VDD paradigm a bit.
What we might always want to have is the most the simplest, the most direct way of working with data in the like to have inputs and outputs where you feed data and you get data back from the timeline. Yeah.
In terms of usability or in terms of.
That's not also in terms of usability. I'm just saying this because this is the most direct way of getting a hand on data in the patch, in the data flow paradigm. This is the where there's no magic. Yeah, you can place an OC node in on top, receive some data, get it hand on that data, tweak it a bit, filter it, feed it into the timeline, get back what's done in the timeline, what's timelined, and get a hand on this data and do whatever you want and put it there or there. You know,
I mean,
you don't have to think about data binding.
You're thinking to the timeline here, basically.
I'm just saying this is the most direct approach, and whatever data binding and crazy VL integration we can come up with, this should always work. This should always be possible. This because it's the most simple approach where no magic is happening, where no fanciness.
I mean, and also in terms of visualization, you can follow the whole data flow. I'm with you, but sometimes you have to find other.
I think it also helps debugging.
No, but
Yeah, totally.
Like sometimes something is not working and then if it's lost in the magic, like even if you love all the magic and you normally work with it, sometimes systems get so complex, that you get lost on debugging. And if you just can sidetrack it, okay, this is just directly the node, it's working. Network and blah, blah, blah is there.
But it has also its own limits.
yeah, but you were saying you were you're not comfortable with something, and I wasn't sure about that, and that was my reaction on that.
I mean, this is.
I mean, I guess the discussion is what kind of tools you prefer to work with. I love working with patches, but Ari maybe is dreaming of a standalone version of Kairos, no?
Or an application.
It's an application where you don't build anything in VL, but you rely on, okay, creating a clip and then maybe building a custom visual programming language like you did in your tools, where you can there define the rules, how you plug things together, but still we're talking about building an application on top of this, which wraps all of this. Which is possible, and we have a section there, as you suggested as well.
So mostly when you have like a very complex data type or many patches and you have like your data here and you want to just connect to this little box here, you have to go through the whole structure just in order to connect to this little box. Sometimes but it breaks the whole.
We have, no, there's no, we don't have to
There are other
we
strategies
have
to do
just
that.
one way to do it. We just need to figure out the different ways and communicate that there are different ways and explain when to use what. I was just saying that I would like to have this option to go data flow oriented, and if I can go more object oriented or even plugin oriented, like there's a controller that receives the OC data for me, and then this is even a different beast. Yeah, it's more like controller oriented. So we have different approaches here, and would be nice to be able to decide.
I mean, if we build in a modular fashion, if we build an envelope editor or layer X, right? That's very essential. You can have input, or, you can plug input here or forget about it. Let's imagine to replicate the timeliner, old timeliner. That's a module that you put there. You can timeline some tracks and you have the output pins, and you can provide a time. This is the data flow, the basic data flow that you're talking about, no? It's an object there that you can sample, it's a function. You can sample and you get some numbers, then you can continue to fetch with it. This is the basic, no? How you, which is part, it's not like building other graphs that reflect and interact with the VL graph, talking about Kairos graphs, but it's literally just extending the patch with an advanced function there.
Yeah, but I want to have a UI for that, right?
Yeah, it's just a function with a UI.
Isn't that the case that we looked at when I was still there yesterday? You had this patch where you said, look, simple timeline, add track, and then at the bottom, sample track. That's how I understood it, no?
I mean,
and that's it.
The old Kairos nodes already have output pins, no? So you just put a timeline there, create a track, enable the output pin, and you have the pin. Press play and just get the value. So
that use case
that principle
is always there.
Yeah,
No
I would
question.
say no question.
No.
You can always use it in this way. I would say. In that case, there is an internal clock already, but I think that you can override from outside. I don't remember. Still, because in that case you would need an independent clock, no? Or you would need to provide a time, because at that point it's not part of a evaluation graph. It's just another node for you to sample it. But anyway.
But can we distinguish? So we say this is the old timeline style. So this is always there. And how do we distinguish the other mode of interacting with tracks? Is it basically two different ways? Because one is via data binding and one is via patch cords, old style? Or is there even a third one? Can we give them names? Can we clearly talk about? Does that make sense? Or
I don't know, maybe we can have both, you know?
I'm saying we should have at least 2 or 3 and name
No,
them.
at the same time, I'm saying.
Yes, also, yeah.
Like, I want to go with the approach, building a timeline, because I'm a user. And at some point, I want to just decide to use those output pins, or just use the one output pin that gives me that handles or I just enable this option, the data binding option, and
Yeah.
then I don't have to deal with all the data that I could get.
Maybe
but
in this case, we need like
I don't need-
also visual feedback when we are using the data binding and we are using the traditional way to connect the pins.
So.
Okay.
still the question is-
Go different go to repatch everything, or yeah, or build a new timeline. Just want to have all the options at once.
How do we
If
call it?
possible.
It's like data
When I
extract.
think it's formatted,
We have
like
two
this.
modes of data extract. Is that a way to
There-
talk about it?
There is a explicit data binding and implicit data binding.
Okay.
Yeah, okay, so is
I like
two
That we
two
call
different
that.
types, and we call them that, and
I don't know. Sounds good.
sounds good to me also.
It's
And
a section.
I can only think on two different use cases in this case, or for the moment.
an explicit would be the old style, right?
That the binging.
Yeah.
On the other
It's
side,
like,
the other one.
Data binging.
Yeah,
It's a
that's
form
like
category.
Netflix, watching the whole Netflix series, but it's a timeline. And would it make sense here to also think about other ways of, like I was suggesting before, having some sort of SDK API-like interface to Kairos, that I could get the data through yet a third mechanism via code or HTTP request or blah, something like this, that is not this implicit data binding, but it's, you know, the data is available through another mechanism.
Can you explain that a bit better for a non-programmer?
I think it's for programmers, this, yeah.
In that case, you don't need to explain that.
Yeah.
No, you mean like making, okay, I patch this timeline, I create these timelines with these structs, and I have a local clock that I can play back to sample these timelines, well, and the output of this is available. And I'm sending over OSC.
Or, yeah,
For
whatever, yeah,
For
like
example,
Kairos is exposing a mechanism to like get this data, which I can then implement through OSC or NetMQ, blah, blah, blah.
But I think this is covered, because it's just on top of that.
it's
It's like a specialized.
it's still an implicit data binding, in the sense that the Kairos data binder, Kairos binder that is there now, it's this binder node that takes a data type, and you can start building a Kairos system, no? And then you plug a clock. This thing is sampling the graph. And it's not only sampling all the channels, it's also getting the paths from the channels and writing directly anywhere with data type. You could have this other node that, okay, you can plug a clock and a tree from Kairos. Then you also say, okay, instead of writing somewhere in the data type, just send over OSC the channels, right? This is similar thing, still you just expose all the channels that are up there. That's it. You can add, I don't know, yeah.
But they are not exposed in the patch, they are exposed via OSC.
Yeah, like being,
And you don't see that in the gamma patch, for example.
No, it's just getting the final graph, sampling all the channels internally, and for each one of them, sending over OSC.
Yeah, but you don't, in this case, you don't need to patch it. It's already done via script or via whatever, no?
that's the feature.
So it's still implicit.
Yeah, it's like like we were saying, it's like a specialized
It's
case
not
for the
even, it's
implicit.
not data binding because you're not binding to anything, just
Also.
exposing.
Yeah,
It's
yeah.
more like connected to.
I'm thinking it's more like on top of the explicit. You connect, instead of connecting a cable, you connect a network connection. That's my.
You will need
thinking
to
about it.
explicitly say from the receiver, say, okay, connect to that parameter that comes with this address. So in a way, you build manually the link.
Yeah, it's
no?
it's an
The
explicit
link explicit.
statement.
It's an
You need to
implicit exposure, but explicit by
Well, where you consume it, yeah, of course, you have to be explicit, but.
like
it's-
in
it's-
Amazon, you need to enable, I don't know, OSC receiving thing. Okay, when I receive that channel connected to this object in my UI. No, like, you do it
Can
explicitly.
we write that down? I mean,
what is
under
explicit and
under
implicit.
explicit and implicit, the different workflows or paradigms, like explicit is data flow oriented thinking. Implicit allows, I don't know, object oriented thinking.
I mean,
Would
it
you also-
depends on how do you think about that, because implicit can be the opposite.
Yeah.
I mean,
Maybe the
maybe we
terms
need
are
to define that. I
misleading.
mean, I like the naming, but we have two categories.
And can that be used in parallel?
Yes,
In that,
Like in parallel, so basically you have like a command, add a channel or blah, blah, blah. And then if you have, for example, the OSC and the explicit connected,
you can always do it. Yeah.
explicit is always there.
Okay, but
Well,
what,
I mean,
what if
you can have the same node with
Well,
different
manual.
options. Say, if you connect the data types, you just try to reach there and plug stuff in. Or still you can enable options. Okay, send that also over OSC.
And
then
over
the
maybe
channel,
and
the
over HTTPs,
Or-
you can change any number of outputs.
but that would mean for the explicit data binding, if you add one new parameter, would there also be automatically a OSC and a media version created?
I would
Which you
say,
just
Up
set
to
up?
you, yeah.
I would say so, yeah.
Okay, yeah, I agree.
So you have like a server also
Exactly.
behind that is somehow accessible through
Yeah,
different
yeah, yeah.
mechanisms.
So
So
if
if
you
you're
have it
saying
all
manual,
explicit-
data binding maybe.
Maybe the naming explicit and
Manual.
implicit is not so well chosen.
I mean.
Manual.
How,
What is implicit? Exactly, because I want to specify, I don't know, the address, OC address, I'm explicitly configuring the thing, so what do you mean by implicit data binding? It's a bit fuzzy for me.
Yeah, no, I agree.
Yeah.
but you're right, so if, for me, implicit could be also implicit from gamma side. So.
Implicit because in a way, if you have a workflow, like you create these traps, not manually, but because Kairos can do it, no? You just in your data type, in your record mode, you don't create any track manually. You just play with your tool, and those tracks get added automatically with the right path that matches with the property that you're operating on, but you're not doing anything. And then automatically this gets bind to the data type. So when you play back, it writes into there, so you don't do anything.
Automatic,
Could call it automatic instead of implicit.
automatic versus manual.
Yeah,
Or ghost, whatever.
I would even say the data binding term is misleading because on this other use case, it's not really data binding, it's just exposing the data, but the binding thing.
yeah. The automatic it is data binding, but the manual is not really data binding.
Now,
Well, you're binding data to properties.
But only one direction.
They are both manuals, but one is exposing in a more, this is what the Gregor say, one is more object oriented and the other is more like a data flow oriented. No.
Yeah.
But internally they work in the same way, but we are seeing the data flow or not. And also the designation is much faster in the object oriented way.
I mean, I always thought of this lifespan of a process node, like when we designed what is a process node, that it gets created, then it gets updated all the time, and at some point it goes away. Then this is true for all the ingredients. And at some point, I try to conceptualize what is a process patch and what are process nodes. And of course, when you start thinking about that process from the beginning to end, and time somehow comes into play. And at some point, I had also this idea or intuition that this should be utilized with timeline, this process patch. And now we are here somehow coming from a different route, but in a way that's the thing that you could wish to just enable a timeline for any patch you are in, because any stateful patch has this time component in it. And you could say, well, okay, let me just adjust how long does this process go, and how long is this going, and what's with this property and that property, and when you add a field or a path, then you add a track, and it's the same thing.
This is what I was saying.
Yeah,
If you have the inspector is the most generic access to your patch, right? So every inspector view, like with all the parameters, you can, if you pick a parameter there in the inspector, that points exactly in somewhere in the patch, precisely to one spot in the patch. So on the inspector, you will say, okay, I want to timeline this. Trigger that, and that get handed to the timeline, for example, you know? So the inspector is already the most generic view over a patch. I would say the access point to every aspect of the patch potential. So
And also
And that's automatic data time, that falls under the second category, no?
Just
we can bring many kinds of functionalities based on that, working on the inspector, for example, not only timeline, but time, for example. I don't need to connect a LFO to this guy. For example, I just need that this parameter goes up infinity, you know? And I can connect that directly to time. Or time divided by 2, or random, or this kind of things. Maybe this breaking the whole PUB paradigm.
It's more like it's. And at a certain level, I think it will get hard, you know, without an inspector, not to really keep track.
It depends also on how we visualize this layer of. We have a kind of visual feature in the patch with other color, with something, and you see the parameter is changing. So when you click it, okay, you have an inspector, and you see the little script connected to the sky, and also it opens the other way to work and more friendly for coders. Not everything about patching also is, I don't know.
I'm not sure if it's that much related to an inspector. You're always going the route via inspector from patch to over property to inspector to timeline. I don't know. For me, it's just timelining a property. It's not really. Inspector is just one way to edit the current values of a property or of a node, or the input pins of a node. But if I want to just timeline the properties of the patch, then I don't see where the inspector.
I'm thinking more. Don't think about timeline. Think about more scripting properties. So adding functionalities to a property, for example. And I think using the inspector is a nice way to do that. You can also go to the patch and right click and say, okay, I want a script, and you write it down. So it's more like this kind of level of invisible way to control properties inside a patch.
That's maybe think more conceptually than and less via the actual UI. So it's about connecting something to the property that a script or a timeline, but something that controls the property, not the patch. There's not some path that writes a value all the time into the field via a path. No, it's a script that runs the field, or it's a timeline that runs the field. That just ways of controlling or visualizing or editing who's in charge, yeah? Who's in charge of my properties of my pet.
I don't know, think more like a other level, other layer of controlling the thing.
Yeah, for me, I have this window, and currently there's just always a patch editor in there. And for me, it's like, okay, maybe there's more to it, and maybe there are tabs for that, or some ways to enable different views onto that system here. Currently, there's just the data flow oriented system.
Yeah.
And then there might be a textual programming attached to the same thing here, or a timeline. Maybe I can see everything at once.
But right now we have only one way to interact with the values. It's connecting things, which is super nice for debugging, also visualizing the whole data flow. But I think it would be also nice to explore other ways to do that. And this is a nice moment. So when
Like this clip, this scripting thing.
yeah, kind of scripting
It's-
and also attaching values to or creating a track in the timeliner. I'm more thinking about using. I don't know. That should be.
Yeah, like you could have me learn, for example, you could pick a parameter and say listen to it, and then that's it. Yeah, and then you can connect 5 parameters with different mapping maybe,
And you can extend very easily.
and also define whatever it is, yeah.
And you can combine both of them. You can be I mean, maybe people can use more the scripting side of things. And the old school guys can use
They all nicely integrate all this. Like, for example, I just imagine now, if you have a scripting clip in a timeline, you put a scripting clip, and in there you can script with any language you want a function, no, over time. I think when you get there, you just run the function.
Yeah.
And this is nicely integrated with a visual programming language. And you can, it's school, and we can scale up and implement. You have an OSC receiver clip, no? And we're just talking about timeline because it's here, but imagine like a matrix, no? When you have preset, and in each one of them, you can have different scripting or different receiving, mapping, or you can have just one for all of the. I don't know.
There are many tools using this system. So in data flow context, for example, also in Grasshopper you have it, in Touch Designer you have it, and this is one thing that I'm missing since a while in Beauty. So there is not this kind of level of, I don't know,
Yeah, but this would mean you have a graph representation
yeah.
of your patch, and that will be reflected by the inspector. And then you have like a defined way to inject stuff into the graph, which could be Kairos or MIDI-learn or whatever, so that there is something how to plug this in. So that you could add a service, like in the tools, you would say, hey, at MIDI-learn, and then you would have this available in the inspector. You would have set up the MIDI channel, blah, 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 the interface. And then you could say right click, and then you would have another option for this parameter and say, listen to MIDI. And make a min max and stuff. And same for OSC or for Kairos, you could say add Kairos functionality on my graph. And then suddenly you get all the other stuff around. Yeah. And to find a common system for all these things so that it's clear. You don't need to invent all this new stuff, but it's clear like how this is all hooked up.
It could be just a very simple idea that's built into VL very deeply. Like this update thing is sometimes it feels like a normal operation, but sometimes it's also special. I don't know. It's just a pattern, and we can of course do something like update is special whenever you call update from outside, let's say you have a spread of particles, and you for each them and call update on each of them, that calling update always means not only calling into the update operation, but also if there's anything attached to the particle running the script, and then running the update operation itself. So that that if there's some plugin attached to the particle patch, that you can somehow rely on before update. This script runs that fetches the OC messages and stores it in some field, and then we can rely on that. And so, but we of course need to find a way that so that the user doesn't have to call all these plugins by hand, and also you want to find a system where the patch is or all these plugins are somehow related to moments in time. Do you really want to think about the additional repair patch or run plugins operation?
I mean, I didn't go so far.
But we at some point need to go that far and need to think of ways how a programming language like BL, where you can do anything, more or less, where we somehow squeeze into that and call something that we didn't program as a user, that just happens. So we need to come up with something that's into our code.
Maybe baby steps. So maybe we can start just with just controlling IO boxes, not really properties, not really operations of methods inside a class, but more in a very, very high level. And then see how it behaves. I don't know.
I think that would come with the inspector functionality. That once you have that, that would be the next step. And you could take Mididol or something else, like a more simple use case, to have a first implementation to check this.
Let's see.
Yeah.
I mean, I don't know if it's a good idea.
Again, I'm
or
not sure if I understand what the inspector, how's the inspector related. For me, it's just like me learn plugin that.
The inspector is just a nice connection, a conceptual way to do these kind of things. We can do that also in the canvas, but I think in the canvas is going to be much difficult to have this kind of context menus and the whole thing.
Yeah.
And the inspector is a nice place to do this kind of also to experiment.
Yes, you do not would have the UI problem. You would see X, Y, Z, you right click it, and then you have all the plugins, may that be the timeline, the Mididol, or whatever, or export also.
What are you inspecting? You're inspecting a
patch or a patch. You would have like an XYZ object, whatever. And then in the inspector, you go there and you see the XYZ values, and then you can right click and get a menu of all the things that you have in the tools attached to your VL product, and then you would directly have all the UI functionality linked there. Yeah. And it would be far easier to inject things like this. You would not have to say, have that value, listen to MIDI, blah, 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 yeah, in the patch, but you could do this directly in the inspector, resolve it, take it out without needing to get 5 patch levels down, yeah, and paste in and delete out nodes. And by just removing the tool, everything would be removed.
Yeah. I think about that because I think
If you do that for the timeline, it's done.
you can extend that for many other things.
Exactly. So it's more like really think it now, architecture-wise through, to make sure you have this kind of interface that you rely on to inject the timeline into the inspector. Because then you can also inject others.
And also going back to the coders, that could be a nice patch to involve more coders into the video game because they are more familiar with this kind of interacting with data. I don't know. Maybe this is a kind of naive way of thinking, but we can attract more people. I don't know, maybe more people more familiar with this way of working.
I think it's also a question of how the inspectors in the end, if you build an application, you know, how much do you have the inspector then also as control to your software so that you could build UI on top, but you would at least have this kind of raw inspector view on your application when it's exported. And then if you could still, as an end user, without accessing the patch, you know, still introduce other things, then the L could be another thing of building mid-level tools or whatever. So you could build some music stuff and then still add a timeline, for example. So you could build a synthesizer, for example. Yeah, in your patch and export it as an application, but then use all the other ecosystems still, you know, also as an end user.
You don't need to build your own UI for that. So
You would get so much fucking stuff for free. And that would be really an argument, you know, and also on other levels, use VL, because you get so much stuff on top, yeah, in your application.
I don't know what it implies for you guys.
I think it's on the same level, like if you integrate this timeline, you are on the complexity level that you need to solve anyhow. Yeah, and then it's more like, okay, now I do not write the timeline, but I write the MIDI listen function, yeah, which will be compared to the timeline drastically more simple, yeah, because a lot of stuff is already done. It's more like to wrap it into this listener, you know, so that you get another entry in your dropdown.
I'm with you. What Chris says.
I'm not sure if I understood, maybe we just should go into maybe, yeah, into a more detailed discussion, or you have to repeat. I'm not sure. I got all the ideas with the inspector and inspecting a patch and inspecting a pad and attaching some functionality that does something for me. But beyond that, I didn't get.
It's an interface to the graph, basically, yeah. And you could also, like in the end, basically first think of the graph. The patch is a graph, and the inspector is one. It's basically just another visual representation of your VL graph.
Not only visual, so it's another way to interact with them.
Also to interact, but first you see basically all the data. Yeah, so you see all the object structure, everything that is in there is inside, shown in the inspector. It's currently reflected. Yeah, and then it's another tool to interact with your graph. And I think it's a good way because it can solve a lot of stuff. Also, like not only median, but for example, presets. You could say, for this part of the graph, I want to extract a preset. Yeah, so you could build a preset tool, yeah, and then when you right-click wherever in your object structure, you could say save as preset.
I'll send to fastest log of presets, whatever.
Exactly.
Yeah. I can't feel.
It has a lot of potential, I think.
Yeah, I don't know. What's the preset? Do you wanna save a part of the patch?
No, the settings, like all the nodes, yeah, like the colors, blah 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 blah, the X, Y,
configuration.
and the force. It's a configuration, basically, exactly. Yeah,
It's a row in the matrix. Okay.
Yeah, a row or a slot in the matrix.
A row, a slot that represents internally all the channels, all the parameters.
That you connect, but it can be also, I mean, you can add parameters afterwards. So you create a slot and you bind certain parameters to them, and you can decide at any moment, okay, I need a parameter more. And you can add it to this kind of slot. And also you can do the same with other kind of abstractions, not a, I don't know, not a matrix slot, but maybe a control channel like OSC, MIDI, whatever, or a moving thing that you connect to that. You have your moving thing here, doing stuff, and you can connect that to this kind of parameters. I don't know, maybe I'm talking to you.
I think the point is finding this discussion about binding.
Yeah.
Yeah, like right click on the inspector and saying I get the data, live data from the MIDI channel, my MIDI server there. Just fine, to what though? Straight. But instead of thinking, that's why I made Kairos. Instead of thinking, okay, you need to extend VL and say, okay, there's the possibility to bind directly, insert custom operations in the graph where I call eventually the MIDI binding or the. To avoid that, I thought of Kairos in the sense that in there, you define exactly, you can control when things happen, when you bind stuff. You could put a voice on MIDI click there is where you can bind. And now I'm saying manually put a click there, but this can be totally automatic. You just, okay, I'm in this framework and I'm thinking time-wise, I put my time here, and then in my inspector, I say, okay, this parameter will control it with that channel, and automatically I create an entry there in time where there is this binding. Or I don't want to think about that time. I'm in a preset machine, and I'm saying, okay, now I want to edit this preset, which is named like that. Okay, I'm selecting this preset, go back to my inspector, select this property. Okay, I want to map with this OSC channel, or I want to write a script there, and this automatically gets stored as clicks inside this preset system, but still, that is where they find my binding. But Kairos is this.
That would be then the question, like have a layer and just have a stupid value there and not say I have a median or an OSC.
A constant value click.
Yeah.
Exactly. And that would appear in the inspector, and then you could say in this median.
Yeah, in this vector, you could say, I want to have a constant value, I want to have a live value, and that is, would even create a pin that you can connect from
The constant value would be the default thing. And then you could say this is remote controlled.
The default is nothing. If you say store this in time, then it would create a constant switch, right? Because you could also decide to not store any traffic for this parameter, right? But if you store it, also you need to create a trap and put a constant value there. Or you say, no, I want to have OSC, and instead of a constant, it will replace with a OSC. No? So this is the binary machinery that is already there.
Exactly, but this is not only limited then to Kairos. It could be just any value, even if it's not in a clip, but just an IO box in the patch.
But
or in
that's how you then take this Kairos graph and you bind it to your patch.
Yeah.
That's the other side of the thing. There is where you define the logic of the binding, how you want to control things. And then you need to take that and reflect into your code.
Yeah.
So there's not just a binder to a data type, there's a binder to the patch and to the DL graph.
Nice question on how to begin this.
Baby steps.
I think it's easy.
Yeah, but you can get lost there.
Yeah,
It's like from integration wise, I think I would start with the inspector and the binding thing. If you think about like what comes first. Yeah, you could of course work on the timeline.
The binding part is done. Kairos is there.
But not the integration, I mean, not a friendly way to integrate all the things, so you have to patch everything.
No,
Pretty much, no?
but you would have to bring it together with the inspector, right? So to really have the UI right click.
So first of all, like, we are talking about OSC, we should think about a new tool then, which is OSC server, no?
Yeah.
Where, or MIDI server, where we define channels, no? And they are available. But this is another tool. Then, once we have this tool, we could implement very easily, it's like 5 minutes actually. Implement a clip or a keyframe, whatever, that works in Kairos, that is able to listen to that tool.
Yeah, but I cannot see as a clip, but as binding anywhere, not necessarily to the clip. Because then the clip itself could use that binding. You know, not thinking about Kairos and clips and blah, 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 blah at all, but just think about a specific value that you want to control anywhere in your patch. And you could just say, okay, I bind it to an OSC. And of course, this value could be something like a constant in
But
the
the
clip.
clip is the binding.
Yeah, then the clip is the binding, but then, you know, it's really, then it's a wording question, and then.
But that's what dynamic keyframes is. Yeah, man, this is what I thought. It's just a binding. It's a binding into a context. In time, in a timeline.
But even without a timeline.
Without a timeline, you can have just like
External value.
I mean, if you have just one preset, and that's just one value per constant in your system, not always that one. Still, in there, you can define a binding, no? But Kairos can do more, and it allowing you to have multiple presets that points to timelines and to whatever. That's where you can add new kinds of binding for.
And this is where I think we need to be careful with all this kind of timeline functionality. To say the first thing is the really raw stuff, it's like a preset. Drawn, written as JSON first. Not in any timing specific, because it's already so helpful in a patch, you know, without all the timing.
Do you see that a preset is nothing more than having all the clips or the timeline aligned and not moving time?
Absolutely,
You get the thing,
I'm
no?
aware.
Because the essence of a clip that points to a resource, exactly that, no? Just bind. That adds some specialities about the fact that it's into the time domain context, that add that on top, but the essence is the same. So this binding possibility is already in Kairos. Then we could say, okay, then it's about building these tools around that offers like their resources. So it's in the server or that's
Audio, for example, audio analysis parameters. We can have our audio server with some
you
available.
can think of a very generic like server, source server, where you can say, okay, when I have a channel which takes from MIDI, I'm going to have another channel which takes from OSC, when I have another channel what has an input pin where I feed some audio analysis or whatever. But those are very generic channels with certain types that you can listen to, you can connect to. It's another tool. Which it looks like a Kairos thing again, but still.
Yeah, yesterday we not only had a look at this beautiful visualization with this is Kairos and this is a layer X and here are my 4 different keyframes. But we also had a look at the code, and basically these are already, yeah, the yellow one. Yeah, these are implementations. And but these are already 4 different ways to get data from. And I mean, if as a user, maybe I don't want to understand. Maybe I just want to be able to state, oh look, there's patching and there's timelines and there's OC and stuff. But these are all brothers and sisters. So the question would be, if you are in a timeline, how can I get from the timeline to patching or to I don't know, direct object manipulation without data flow, without the need to read from a pad or write back to a pad. So for me, it sounds like these are all portals to different ways of thinking, like there's a data flow. So inside a clip or inside a keyframe, I can choose different portals. Yeah, I can choose data flow. I can choose object orientation. I can choose OC. I can choose other composition. Yeah, composition bit. Or I can, I don't know what else we have, but you know, I just as a user, I just want to point into different.
What do I get my value?
Yeah, I have to decide one. When I input, I have to decide one. On an output, I can maybe select several. Right into the pad output to data flow and also send via OC. But on an input, I would just from the list of I don't know 6, 7 portals, I have to choose one. But yeah, it's would be great.
Yeah, this
to think of it on that level, and if I'm somewhere else, like in the patch, maybe there are also bridges to those other worlds. That I always can when I'm in a data flow oriented world, I'm in a patch. So maybe I can have a node set to just feed another portal to send to the timeline or to send. You know, it's just again a matrix how to connect each and every idea. Where data.
I think what Chris said before about the binding part being a separate level of abstraction from the clip or the even Kairos. I think that's important, you know, like because you maybe don't even want to use Kairos, but you want this functionality, or maybe you don't want it as a clip. I cannot think why right now, but use cases will come. And I think conceptually also it's a separate thing, you know, like in terms of abstraction. This data binding is something like a bridge or a patch bay or whatever you want to picture it as. That's a feature that the clip can make use of. But to think it is the clip is conceptually weird for me, you know, like it's a separate idea, no?
Well, it would basically be taking this binding mechanism that is inside the clip and putting outside, again, building another tool, right? That exposes binding, and the clip, there could be another clip that say, instead of providing my own binding, I just connect and use that binding that this other tool produce.
Yeah, exactly. It's like adding a new concept in here and
Which
separating.
It's just a list of binding options, which are out of time, ahora, which in the end, is, in my way of thinking, is just another. It's like you have a timeline, 1D, you have a matrix, which is a set, a preset system, you have a timeline 2D, you have different tools with different dimensionalities. You have a preset system is 0D because you don't have. For me, it's just a preset system is just a way to store certain settings. And a binding provider would just be that. I guess.
I think you should just be able to expose this binding, the binding provider. You could leave it inside the clip as you have it. It is inside the clip, if I'm not mistaken.
Well, now it's basically.
Yeah, but it's, yeah, it's inside, right?
Now it's binding to the input pins of the.
Yeah, but
timeline, for
you
example.
couldn't be able to exactly with the same setup that is existing there, with the same structure, if you could be able to expose it, then if you want to change that manually, you could be able to do that. It's also fluent enough that you will see it in other places. You don't need to introduce a new methodology in order to do the binding. Or am I oversimplifying it?
It's more like about terminology. Flip can be.
Yeah, I think so too. And I think it's more understanding, like you pointed out. See the binding as one term,
Yeah,
that Kairos uses. Even if the binding comes from Kairos,
yeah.
and it provides the interface set. I more see it as a crucial set of BL. Yeah, that even if we come with here, it should not be part of Kairos, but of BL itself, because it's a ground functionality that should be there. So that people can come with new interfaces.
So it's an essential part of animation. So this cannot right now. It's a bit tough to animate inside the UAV. How
Still,
it's
the binding, just
a connection.
sort and target,
Yeah.
like a.
It's like a bridge, yeah.
And then you can read from a parameter and you can write.
But when is it?
That depends. For example, when you click the mouse, when you say, or when media arrives, like always, for example. Yeah, like in terms of, like the binding is kind of always active, always listening. So, and the input might be for a media, every time media control change comes, it is sent through the binding, through the defined parameter.
But what do you mean that it's always active?
It's always listening. It's not always. Yeah.
I don't understand, because then you can adjust one binding per parameter.
If no media comes, so no, you can have, for example, also listen to presets, right? That you come from files. If the media is sent, you know the preset, that is your value.
Then in the scenario in which you wanna bind from MIDI parameter and from OSC parameter, it's always coming signals.
You can decide what to do. If multiply with each other.
Okay, so they are not always active.
No.
And what they would fight.
They would find, yeah, they would find, that's why then you lose control.
But how?
You can decide. There are many options.
Then they are not active. Then one is active in a certain moment and one is active in the other moment. And then what you have? A preset machine. Two clips, they are binding to the source and you activate one or the other. The binding itself is just an idea, just this connected to that. But when you really activate it, that's the crucial part.
Yeah, but that's the question how you come there, right? So for example, you could have value A and B, and one is listening to MIDI, the other one is listening to OSC at one time. Then you could have your timeline. One clip is listening to A connected to MIDI, the other one is listening to B connected to OSC. And then in your timeline, you can arrange when to listen to what, or blend between, or multiply them, or whatever. Right?
Or set a precedent. So if this guy comes, the other one doesn't do anything. But this is
Apparently, they are different properties of a patch.
You have a lurk value. Right? Which is lurking something. And then if you want to listen to MIDI, otherwise you would have to, yeah, I don't know how you would listen to multiple sources.
But that's an issue, because that's exactly what I want. I want to timeline something, and then at some point I want it to be connected to a light source from OSC. Then, but just in the moment, or just in this percent, just in when I trigger it.
How about Nathan, you, like in the manual way, with pins, you can only put one link into one pin, you know, it's the same thing.
But you can.
But you can,
That's why you have multiple pins.
Like, yeah, exactly, so you can have
Or-
multiple bindings, multiple data sources.
Huh?
You can have multiple data sources as well, like listening to MIDI and in different
Yeah.
channels, and then you compose them however you, if you want to add them or multiply
So that's
them
what
or this or that.
So that's what I'm saying. They do nothing. They are not active. They are just ideas. It's just saying, I am a binding, and what I offer you, I say, you should connect this to this. This is my instruction, and it's up to you to apply this.
Yeah.
Okay, so they are not active.
No, if you in the inspector say listen to MIDI active, then it's active. And then you're listening to MIDI. And then it's a question of what you do if you're listening to OSC as well. Should you say, hey, it's a conflict, you're already listening? to
No,
MIDI?
you should have a drop down and you can choose one or the other, no? In this.
Exactly, or even both. Even both.
To each other, or you multiply to each other. I think this is not really a problem. So this is on the user level. The user decide how to do with several sources.
But my question remains, when you do that, when you listen to it? Is it like the update of the some time in your frame, this has to
No,
happen.
you have an internet connection, you have a network connection to OSC, you get a signal, OSC comes, you get the value, you send it without the update, you send it there. That would be my basic
But I
information.
think not
Of course, you could change the tool, yeah, or make another option when you go to the tool, you could say, listen, send this value just on update, you know, so that if like 100 values come in between, you ignore them. Yeah.
Well, we're talking about building another instrument basically. It's an instrument, it's not like a PI functionality embedded, it's just an instrument. That simply listen, and we can add bindings there. And something that we can already build, no?
Yeah, to me, it sounded in a very simplistic sense, I think it's just like assigning a data source to a variable. And then I can use this variable whatever I want, you know, but I have it there, it's somewhere available in a centralized fashion, like I have this patch bay where I connect all my inputs in some boxes, slots, variables, whatever you want to call them, and then how I use them and when is up to me.
But that's another tool itself, no?
Yeah,
And I
well,
think you have already that in the Kairos ecosystem. You have this.
That's why
this option.
I'm trying to say, but I don't know, maybe.
But I mean, the clip, you have a MIDI input, that is also atomic, you cannot listen to something else.
Immediately.
Yeah, or it's just listening to that one thing.
Or you could have also something that listens to multiple videos. Why not? You can.
But what would you do then when you listen to multiple things?
It's the same problem that you were saying.
Exactly. So the question is, where do you solve that issue? Do you solve it on parameter level?
In my view,
Yeah.
I saw, since I want to decide when to listen to what, if I want to decide, or if I don't want, I can just listen to both, and whatever signal it comes, override. No, that's a behavior that I could have, could want. No,
Exactly, but for this, I would say I have these two clips, which you would have also anyway, and then you could say, okay, this one is in the inspector, here I listen to MIDI, there I listen to OSC, and the rest is up to me in my Kairos ecosystem, you know, how I compose it. Is it multiplied or whatever?
There are not many cases. It's multiply, adding maximum, minimum, and maybe other two more. So it's not so complicated. In the 90% of the cases.
that's why there is.
I think we are overthinking on that.
No, I think it's crucial now to make the split, and that is really worthy discussion, you know, and I would say the inspector is raw. And even if you listen to two sources and they are in conflict, then that's what it is. Yeah, because sometimes you might want to listen to MIDI as long as it's coming, you know, and then whatever, yeah. And composition is part of Kairos. And if you want to decide on how to compose those sources, then you're working with your clips. But anyhow, you could work without this all, just have your normal patch with all this stuff, yeah, and say this is controlled by a MIDI.
Still, we are, building again MIDI server, no?
Yes,
Yeah, okay, an object, something there, no?
Yeah.
So, and the inspector just check, okay, there is a video server there, so we can write into the inspector the functionality that if these tools are available, you can connect, you can ask them to write into the program.
exactly.
The inspector itself doesn't need to do
Yeah,
anything.
Exactly.
So, again, it's just building another tool.
Yeah, but that would be the level for me for those bindings. Yeah, and then Kairos would use those bindings to connect them to the clips, and then you do the composition.
Well, Kairos will simply say, a clip will say, okay, connect to that binding, that channel that is available from the tool.
Or basically the user does it in the inspector that has the clip
Same.
and says there.
But under the hood, this will happen, no?
But I think that will be insanely powerful
I know.
and the work will be extremely fruitful. And like you could build, like once this is all done, you would have a sequencer, like even without using it in VL. So that would be something, you know, you could say, this is software that is built in VL that people could use. So I think it's also about getting people there and monetization, you know, to continue work. And so this is something you can really easily build tools with.
Yeah, but that's at the core, you know, of this Kairos thing, where now I implemented these clips, but we can extend endless, no? We can imagine any sort of clip that binds to any sort of resource and any tools. They are just empty canvas. You can implement any way you want, anything inside it.
The question is if to your 3-point graphic thing, like layer. Oh, where is that? Is it the color?
Alchemix. What do you mean?
On the, I think that was like the first thing. Yeah, on Alchemix, it's 3-point thing.
3 aspects.
It's 3 aspects. What are the 3 aspects?
Hey man, look at the recording. So
It's composed, right? Layer.
there are these 3 libraries that gets used by Kairos both, and this is about synthesizing values, like, which in the end is compositing.
Where does binding fit in there?
Binding, I would say it's just Kairos. Kairos, you see, this part, this graph show clearly that layer X is just about sampling these layers, but the binding happens at the Kairos level, where you have different, you see, inside, there's always a layer 1D, layer 1D, layer 1D, always just, that's how you access.
And I think it's a 4th element. The bindings.
Maybe it's, we always talk about binding, but you could also, which is a bridge. But we could also think of it differently and say, well, there's global data hubs somehow. So we can think of it spatially. There's this OC address, boom. There's this data hub, and it's connected to OC on this address, and there's the value waiting. Whenever the message comes via network, it gets pushed here to this data hub, and we can, access the value from there. And now I'm just thinking about like some of those data bindings are somehow push based. The other ones are pull based. When is the right moment to copy over the value from so that we don't mess up our state of our object, because we have different moments, and maybe we just updated the patch, and now some downstream method gets called, and in between we receive the message, or field gets written, or should that be defined, or is if we are connected to different data hubs, let's say, is it the latest one that just wins, or do we really wait until the next update? Look
who sent a value and then merge the value in a certain way. So this has to be somehow defined. But let's say you have 5,000 particles. You don't want to have 5,000 OC receivers implicitly, but you wanna have this functionality somehow somewhere else, and then just connect in a very cheap way. So that's why I said for me it's maybe just a set of tools that we have to think about, and then one very easy API to access those data hubs, those defined. So there's like identifier system, and all these data sources work with this one API, so that there's a standardized protocol how to access this in-memory data, so to say, and all these data sources are collecting their data in a certain way, but at some point it's only about bridging to this memories.
So yeah, completely on the same track. And yeah, we made a point with the particles, like if you have 5,000 particles, you not want to have 5,000 entries maybe always in your inspector. Yeah. So that would be a question on.
It was also my example earlier when you have this for each and call update and shall that implicitly call whatnot for each particle, or so this is interesting. When is the moment to collect the data? Or
I think you as a user have to say, and the question is like a default in or default out. You know, what do you have to define? Is something, if you don't configure anything, is that automatically part of the inspector or not? Yeah, so like for the particle, would you have to exclude it, or would you have the slider to include it in the inspector? Or maybe there's even a mode to change those things.
Well, I mean, if you have 5,000 OSC messages coming in, you need to, like, if you're needing this your use case, you will need 5,000 entries in this thing, you know, because you want to use them.
Absolutely.
So, I mean, I don't think we should worry a lot about, like, you know what data you're getting, like when you subscribe or connect to this thing. If it's 1 or 1,000, that's your world.
But it could be if you have like 30,000 particles, which would be possible on the CPU.
And controls
and
one particle with one message. Come on, you would
the inspector. If you accidentally press on particle system and you get your 30,000 particle list,
yeah,
then you might be fucked. Yeah, but
This is not going to happen.
like Sebastian said, it's a good tool that many people work with. This is something you have to keep in mind. Yeah, so
I mean, you can do like an infinite scrolling thing, like you only load the ones you're looking at.
Maybe it's possible.
It's an implementation.
Make the performance there. Yeah, so maybe everything is shown. I don't know. Not against it, and that's way too early. But this is definitely
something
stuff
to consider.
Yeah, that is something that takes a lot of work, although it is a really special use case. Yeah.
But this hub thing, would you imagine like an extension of the channel concept? I'm not completely sure how to do it, but I just wanted to maybe say that we can even break it down more and more. Like
for me, the data hubs was just a way to break down the plugin that does something and then provides data, and that's a different thing.
And it's also
you could even want to adjust like push or pull.
Like this would be like a configuration.
Yes, configure that. push, whenever you get a data, push it to here. I need it in my field or in my clip, or I don't know where. Or you configure, no, let me pull it, and then you can pull different sources, combine them in a way, you get different options then. And you have to specify when to do that, like on update maybe, or I don't know, but if it gets pushed to you, it could happen on events whenever in between.
And it's also about sending, not only receiving. So that you can send it out to me, you can send it out to ArtNet, you can send it out to.
That's what I was saying. Channel object is not because we just.
The channel object has no identifier system attached to it. It's just just observable with nice naming and with a few convenience nodes that manage like cyclic data binding back and forth stuff.
But still, I think that we shouldn't be stuck with the main loop.
Yeah, no, of course, if you have
So
flexibility, it's a lot better.
you need
But,
to.
yeah, but I just wanted to say that channel is comparable to observable, just a little bit nicer to use. And but it like observable is push based. And what with the data hub and the global identifier system, where you can just via identifier connect to a hub and then decide whether push or pull. This is a different speed. I don't know. It's just a different API. Also, I mean, BL probably needs to be in. And support this on a deep level. I don't know. Yeah, but maybe that's not the point. How much BL is in, but we should define what the system looks like, how we want to interact with this data binding or data hub system, and yeah.
I see this also like comparing it to other tools like Unity, creative tools that people are working with. This would be an insanely big task. This is what people use so often. Yeah, and this is stuff that you need to do manually in Unity. You need to make your own behavior, splitting out the OSC data.
Travis was saying he's been using what he's using right now. What is it again? The name of this? It's French. But it's kind of like this, no? It's like a glue to stick things together, and this is like the a hub, yeah, and then
I was taking a look yesterday.
Okay. So I think what we're talking about is somehow on this line, so a centralized communication API, that you can write and read from, and
and you can output values in many ways also. I mean, this is what I think when I think about an animation engine, to have that totally integrated inside Canva. These kind of things. I don't know. This is like
yeah, maybe we should have a look together, because it's not something that I'm not having outputs all day.
but
Maybe let's look at it and point out what are the great ideas in that tool.
Could do that.
I mean, we have to think about, we need sources and targets. This is the whole thing, and how to manage many sources in order to be applied in one target. This is one of the problems. We have timeline, we have MIDI, we have OSC, and they have to be added or multiplied or maximum.
Or take latest.
Yeah, or take the latest, or you can set up a precedent. For example, timeline is always another. When timeline is changing, I don't listen to the needing things. Yeah, so these kind of things, and we can build our own kind of language on that. And there are not many use cases. So it's just to think about what we need instead of overthinking about the possible.
We start with coordinated. And then maybe you can think about what you install, and that's.
What I'm working on is it's actually using this kind of working with several software only with clothes,
I don't know.
but you don't have many cases.
Yeah, whatever.
I
found this.
You have, for example, a bunch of.
Also. Yeah, it's basically the same script, whatever it is, and it just. It's just.
For lunch.
Yeah, it's weird. But, strictly the truth. Yeah.
Let's stay more.
And what?
Let's stay more.
Immortal. Yeah. Let's go for lunch. Huh?
Yeah.
I can show you